So what we're doing is we're using the bodice block, but we're changing the position of the bust and the shoulder dart. So what we have at the moment with our bodice block is a dart extending from the shoulder down to bust point, and then a dart extending from bust point down to the waist. It looks visibly like a seam because it's attached at this point and it continues down. So what we're going to do is 3 little alterations to change the position of the dart, but to keep the same fit that this garment has. So the first one that we'll do is some neck darts. So moving both of these darts up here into this neck. The second one that we'll do is the center front dart, so completely changing the look. So we'll end up with a dart that extends up here to bust point and then across from bust point to bust point in a kind of a T shape. And the last one that we'll be doing is moving the dart position from the shoulder and the waist into a French dart position. Now a French dart extends from bust point, angles down towards the side seam, and it finishes at the side seam, not in the waist and not high across at a right angle, so it's got to angle down. All right, starting with our neck dart. So for the first one, I'm going to show you the slash and spread technique. I've got my center front lined up against the edge of the paper. If you don't have a straight edge, then you can just rule it on. And I'm going to pop a weight on it, trace around, and then cut it out. So making sure to get your dart shaping, the notches, and the drill holes. So I've got my bust point and end of dart drill hole. Now I'm ruling these lines on. The next thing I need to do is to rule on, oh sorry, no, it's the French dart. Here is our neck dart, to draw on the position of our new dart. So the new dart is going to extend from bust point up to the neck. So I'm going to draw it in at this point here and then connecting to bust point. The next step is to cut it out. Okie dokie, now we're going to cut down here. If you're very clever, you can leave a teeny tiny little bit of paper to connect the points here. If you cut it through and separate it, it doesn't matter because we can get that connected after anyway. So we're going to remove the darts. So shoulder dart is gone, and now I'm going to cut out that waist dart. Okay, before I finalize this, I'm going to fold my paper so that we can stick it straight on to get a full pattern. Okay, so we've cut this line up here, we've removed our shoulder dart and we've removed our waist dart. I need to place this center front on the folded paper and use a little bit of tape to hold it down. Now the first thing to do, the first movement, is to close our waist dart, pop a little bit of tape on it so that doesn't move, and then we close the shoulder dart. Now I need to get this shoulder in alignment, so I've got to pull it up a little bit so it matches the shoulder. Okay. And tape it down. Okay, now I have it on the fold. I'm ready to, I've got my new dart position here, and I'm ready to add my seam allowances and transfer my notching, my grain line, and my labeling. Before I do that, I'm going to show you the pivoting technique so that we end up with exactly the same shape, but using a different technique. Okay, so we've done our slash and spread. Now we're going to do the same thing, but using the pivoting technique. So by pivoting, what we're talking about is turning our patterns from a single point, and the point that we're using to rotate our patterns is the bust point, which is the end of both of these darts. So we did that physically by cutting out over here, and here we're going to do it by turning the pattern and tracing around different sections of it. So the first thing that we need is to indicate on our block where the mark, the new mark for our new dart is. So I've taken it over to here, place on the center front, and I've traced that line from this point here. You could also use your tape measure or ruler to get that position. Now I'm placing this on the center front of the block on the folded paper, and I'm tracing, starting the tracing just this section of the neckline here, mark that, and then this lower section of the hem to our waist dart. Once you've got that, you're going to place a pen or a pencil in bust point here and closing this dart. So we're placing the second arm of this dart on top of that position there. So holding it, closing. Now once we have that in position, you'll need a weight so that you can trace around the rest of the pattern. Sorry, the block. Okay, so we're just tracing to this shoulder dart here. And now we're going to rotate again from this point and close the arm of the dart. So place this notch on top of this position. So by rotating from here. That's looking good. And now I'm finishing the tracing of the shoulder and the neck, and I'm finishing at this point that we created on our block there. I've got a nice big dot there. Now I'm going to draw in the arms of my new dart. And we are ready to add our seam allowance, cut it out so that we create our pattern, our full pattern. Now we could close this dart and create the dart shaping on top. The problem with that, or I would advise against doing that, is because you would end up with a lot of fabric up here around the neck and in the shoulder. So to reduce the bulk, what we'll do is simply add seam allowance that comes down into this dart and then it continues around the rest of the garment. So remembering the seam allowance for our bodice block, 6 mils on the neckline, 12 mils on the shoulder, the armhole, the side seam and the waist. In our dart, we're going to add 12 mil seam allowance as well. What I'm going to do now with the pen is to show you this position, the original position of our shoulder dart. We don't need that notch anymore. And the original position of our waist dart, that's also not needed anymore. We will transfer the position of our armhole notch. We will include these notches for our dart. And we will transfer the stitching lines into the seam allowance so that we get the correct positions for our seam allowance notches. Okay, now I'm missing a little bit on my corners down here, so I'm going to use some masking tape to make up the difference. And there's a little bit more on the back as well. Alright, now my pattern is ready to be pinned and cut out. So I'm going to start with, we've already got our dart notches. I'm also going to include my center front, and I'm using another little bit of paper so that my notches are happy to go through 2 layers, but they don't really like 1 layer of the paper. So starting with center front, going to my shoulder, the armhole. We already have the front armhole notch, the side seam, the hem. So I'm moving around in a clockwise way, making sure each of my seams has a notch, but they don't have 2 notches. So center front should be marked on the waist and on the neckline. Then I'm marking the side seam, armhole, the shoulder, and the neck. So now we can see our final pattern, how it mirrors exactly the pattern that we created using the slash and spread technique.